Every December, millions of children line up in department stores, malls, and holiday pop-ups, waiting for the same encounter. A man in a red suit, a white beard, and a gentle voice with the promise that someone is watching, listening, and remembering. Santa Claus feels timeless, almost inevitable, as if he has always existed exactly as we know him. But the Santa most Americans recognize today did not simply evolve on his own. He was built, organized, and standardized. And behind that transformation was a businessman who understood something subtle but powerful. Belief could be shaped deliberately. Long before Santa became a reliable fixture of American retail, Christmas was a looser, less coordinated affair. Traditions varied by region. Appearances differed from store to store. Public Santas ranged from convincing to chaotic, warm one year and unsettling the next. There was no shared standard for how Santa should look, act, or speak. For families, this inconsistency was awkward. For businesses, it was risky. As consumer culture expanded in the early 20th century, that risk became impossible to ignore. Department stores were growing larger and more competitive. Shopping was no longer just transactional. It was experiential. Retailers were learning that atmosphere mattered, trust mattered, and emotion mattered. Christmas was no longer simply a holiday. It was becoming an economic season, and Santa sat at its emotional center. When the experience worked, families lingered and returned. When it didn't, the damage went beyond a single visit. What retailers were beginning to realize was that belief itself had consequences. Children's trust shaped parents' loyalty. A single uncomfortable interaction could unravel the carefully constructed sense of warmth a store was trying to project. Santa was no longer decoration. He was a point of contact between commerce and childhood. And without consistency, that contact was fragile. This was the environment that created an opening for Charles W. Howard. Howard did not invent Santa Claus, and he did not reshape Christmas by force. He recognized a structural problem that others had not yet named. Santa, as he existed in public spaces, was being treated casually in a system that demanded precision. For Howard, that mismatch explained why belief felt unstable. The character was powerful, but the execution was careless. Howard understood that if Santa was going to carry the emotional weight businesses were placing on him, then the role itself had to change. It required intention, discipline, and standards. Belief, he realized, could not survive on improvisation alone. It needed structure. By the early 20th century, America was changing fast. Cities were expanding. Department stores were replacing small local shops. Advertising was becoming more emotional and persuasive. Shopping was no longer just about necessity. It was becoming an experience, carefully designed to shape how people felt as much as what they bought. Christmas sat at the center of this shift. What had once been a quieter, largely religious observance was evolving into a public event built around gift-giving, family outings, and downtown shopping trips. Department stores decorated their windows weeks in advance. Newspapers promised wonder and abundance. Retailers were no longer just selling goods. They were selling the feeling of Christmas itself. At the center of that feeling was Santa Claus. But there was a problem. Santa was unreliable. One store might feature a warm, patient figure who spoke gently to children. Another might employ someone loud, careless, or openly cynical. Some Santas drank on the job. Others broke character, argued with parents, or frightened children outright. For businesses trying to build trust and long-term loyalty, this inconsistency was more than embarrassing. It was a liability. Retailers needed Santa to work the same way everywhere. They needed parents to feel comfortable and children to feel safe. They needed the experience to reinforce the idea that their store was dependable, welcoming, and worth returning to. Without that consistency, the emotional core of the holiday fell apart. And with it, the commercial opportunity. Charles W. Howard recognized this gap precisely because of his background in performance. He understood that audiences respond to discipline as much as charm. A convincing character does not improvise under pressure. He follows rules, maintains control, and protects the illusion at all costs. From Howard's perspective, Santa was being asked to carry enormous emotional weight without being given the tools to do so. That insight reframed the problem. Santa was not failing because the character was flawed. He was failing because the role was unmanaged. Protecting the illusion required structure, not enthusiasm alone. If Santa was going to anchor the holiday shopping season, then the men portraying him had to be trained to deliver the same experience, regardless of location or circumstance. As competition intensified and Christmas spending became more central to retail success, this way of thinking gained traction. Businesses were no longer debating whether Santa mattered. They were searching for ways to control the experience he represented. In that search, Howard found his opening. Howard did not arrive at his ideas by accident. Before he ever formalized Santa as a profession, he spent years working as a performer and entertainer, learning how audiences respond to characters, and how quickly an illusion can break when discipline slips. Performance, he understood, was not just about talent. It was about preparation, repetition, and respect for the role being played. Howard noticed that the most successful Santas shared certain traits. They moved deliberately. They listened more than they spoke. They treated children with patience and sincerity, never rushing the moment or turning it into a joke at the child's expense. These Santas created calm in noisy department stores. They made parents feel at ease. Most importantly, they made belief feel safe. That effect was not accidental. It was the result of technique. From Howard's perspective, Santa was not an improvisation. He was a system. Appearance mattered, from the cut of the suit to the grooming of the beard. Voice mattered, steady and warm rather than theatrical or exaggerated. Even posture mattered because children read body language instinctively. A Santa who slouched or fidgeted sent the wrong message. A Santa who moved slowly and confidently suggested authority and kindness at the same time. Howard also understood that Santa was working under unusual constraints. He had to be emotionally available to dozens of children every hour. He had to respond to tears, excitement, fear, and overwhelming joy, without breaking character. He had to navigate the expectations of parents, store managers, photographers, and advertisers simultaneously. That was not a casual job. It was skilled labor. Yet most men hired as Santas were given no guidance at all. They were handed a suit and told to figure it out. Howard believed this approach was irresponsible. Not only did it risk embarrassing the store, it risked damaging the trust of children. To him, belief was not something to be exploited carelessly. It was something to be maintained carefully, through training and standards. This way of thinking separated Howard from everyone else in the holiday business. He was not asking how to dress someone up as Santa. He was asking how to reproduce the same emotional experience across hundreds of locations. In other words, he was asking how to scale belief without destroying it. That question would lead him to his most consequential idea yet. Once Howard recognized the problem, he moved quickly toward a solution. Informal advice and personal example were not enough to change an entire industry. If Santa was going to function reliably inside modern retail, then the role itself needed to be formalized. Howard's answer was direct and practical. He founded a school dedicated to teaching men how to be Santa Claus. At a glance, the idea seemed almost absurd. Santa was supposed to feel natural, effortless, even instinctive. Teaching someone how to embody that character sounded contradictory. But Howard understood what audiences rarely see. What appears natural on the surface is often the result of preparation beneath it. The Santa School treated performance not as a novelty, but as a discipline. Howard established clear standards for appearance. A Santa's beard, whether natural or artificial, had to look convincing and well-maintained. The suit needed to fit properly and project dignity rather than caricature. Posture and movement mattered. These details shaped how children interpreted authority, warmth, and safety within moments of the encounter. Behavioral expectations were central to the training. Santas were taught to speak calmly and deliberately, to listen attentively, and to meet children at their emotional level rather than performing over them. Howard emphasized patience above all else. The interaction was not meant to be rushed or treated as routine. Credibility depended on taking the moment seriously. Howard also prepared Santas for difficult situations most stores preferred not to acknowledge. Crying children, fearful children, parents who tried to interrupt or redirect the interaction. In these moments, Santas were trained to remain steady and reassuring, preserving the child's sense of safety regardless of what unfolded around them. Discipline was non-negotiable. Drinking on the job, crude language, breaking character, or treating the role casually were not tolerated. Howard was not interested in performers seeking attention. Santa, in his view, was not there to entertain adults. He was there to protect an experience businesses were relying on. What emerged from the school was a new kind of seasonal worker. These Santas understood expectations, followed standards, and carried themselves with purpose. Chance was removed from the role. Santa could now function reliably inside a modern commercial system, with the illusion intact and the process invisible. Once Howard's system was in place, it became a point of reference for retailers seeking a more dependable Santa. Department stores had long used Santa as a seasonal attraction, but now they were being offered something far more valuable than a costume. They were being offered control. A trained Santa could be relied on to deliver the same experience day after day, across crowded floors and long lines, without risk or improvisation. The change was noticeable in how the experience felt to families and store managers alike. Santa became less of a gamble and more of a dependable presence. He anchored the holiday environment in a way managers could plan around rather than react to. What had once been unpredictable was now operational. That reliability carried beyond the store itself. Advertisers and event organizers gravitated toward Santas who could represent Christmas without embarrassment or inconsistency. Public appearances, promotional materials, and civic celebrations increasingly favored the same look, demeanor, and behavior. A more uniform expectation of Santa's behavior was beginning to take hold. This created a quiet but powerful feedback loop. The more businesses relied on trained Santas, the more the public came to expect a certain standard. And as those expectations solidified, any deviation began to stand out. An untrained Santa didn't just feel different. He felt wrong. What had started as an improvement became a baseline. As Howard's system spread, it reshaped more than Santa's image. It quietly transformed the nature of seasonal work itself. Santa was no longer a casual novelty hire brought in for a few weeks and dismissed just as quickly. He became a specialized role within a growing holiday economy, one that carried expectations, discipline, and consequence. Men trained through Howard's school were no longer interchangeable. They arrived with credentials, references, and a shared understanding of what the role demanded. Stores began to seek them out deliberately, valuing experience over convenience. This shifted the balance of power. Santa was no longer simply hired, he was selected. That shift rippled outward. Holiday operations became more coordinated and more serious. Scheduling, conduct, and reliability mattered. Seasonal work, once treated informally, began to resemble year-round employment in its expectations, even if it lasted only weeks. Christmas was no longer staffed casually, it was staffed deliberately. By mid-century, the Santa role had become a recognized seasonal occupation across the country. Men traveled to meet demand. Stores planned around appearances. Families encountered the same version of Santa year after year, without questioning how that consistency came to be. What felt organic was the result of planning, selection, and labor discipline. Howard had not only standardized a character, he had helped create a workforce, one that converted belief into routine, routine into reliability, and reliability into profit, all while keeping the illusion intact. As Howard's approach gained influence within professional Santa circles, it raised an unease that had always lingered beneath modern Christmas. The holiday carried deep emotional meaning tied to memory, generosity, and childhood wonder. But it was now also carefully organized, powered by trained performers, coordinated advertising, and predictable consumer behavior. For some observers, this felt like a loss. They worried that sincerity was being replaced by spectacle, that belief itself was being managed too neatly. Howard understood the criticism, but he did not see himself as dismantling Christmas. In his view, he was protecting it. An inconsistent or careless Santa, he believed, did more damage to belief than any amount of commercial planning. Children did not evaluate motives or systems. They reacted to the moment in front of them. If that moment felt calm, kind, and believable, then the spirit of Christmas survived. If it didn't, the illusion collapsed. By mid-century, the system Howard helped build had largely disappeared from view. Children encountered the same Santa everywhere and never questioned why. Parents trusted the experience without thinking about how it was managed. What had once required coordination became normal. The structure faded into the background, leaving only the ritual itself. Howard, too, faded from public memory. He did not become a household name. He did not attach his identity to the symbol he helped stabilize. His influence remained indirect, embedded in expectations rather than credited outright. Today, the season still runs on the same quiet mechanics Howard understood decades earlier. Every December, when children climb onto Santa's lap and whisper their wishes, they step into a moment that feels ancient and spontaneous. Few realize how carefully that moment is held together. That is Charles W. Howard's legacy, a system so complete that belief no longer needs defending.